Welcome to the Retail Reality Show.
Welcome to another episode of the Retail Reality Show. I'm honored that we have a great guest today, but I have also my great co-host, Yael. Yael, how are you today?
I'm good. Nino, how are you?
I'm fine.
Getting ready for the holidays?
Oh, I really need a break. And that was a busy quarter. I mean, everybody who works in retail, like our guest, knows how busy Q4 is, and at least I need a break. How about you?
I don't get a break, but but yeah, it's a pretty busy quarter or year or that or decade, whatever you want to look at that. Yeah. But
Life.
Exactly, life.
Life.
So I'm very excited because today we are joined by Dmitry Olerinskiy. Right? Yay.
You got it right.
That was the first check.
Exactly. So Dmitry is a senior digital and strategy leader, currently working with Decathlon, but with decades of experience. Obviously, Decathlon is one of the biggest, one of the most complex and digitally ambitious retailers, I would say. Quite advanced in terms of things like checkout and e-commerce and other areas of the business. And yeah, we're happy to have the conversation with you today, Dmitry. Would love to hear a little bit more about your background and tell us who you are.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. Yeah, really, really nice to join you this evening. And I built my career in digital. I started several decades ago. For the recent 15 years, I've been building and running e-commerce retail for large apparel companies in multiple countries, multinationals. And for the last 5 years, I've been with Decathlon, responsible for digital business, and recently with the role of digital strategy director, involved in the whole multitude of initiatives from operational cost revisions to strategy definitions to marketplace projects and to business model innovation, all revolving around retail, all revolving around a very interesting mixture of physical and digital, and all sitting at the very heart of the idea of omnichannel retail.
Great. And I think you have been there for 5 years. I mean, Decathlon has seen tremendous momentum. So I'm really curious to dive into a few questions we prepared for you. But before we do that, Dmitry, we start with a little bit of a rapid fire round. 3 simple questions, and you can just answer like yes, no. First question,
Sure.
Numbers or gut feeling?
Gut feeling.
Oh, I didn't expect that as a strategy guy. Second one.
You go by gut feeling, and then you find numbers to justify the gut feeling.
You haven't defined the context. And as a general approach to life, I do rely on gut feeling a lot. But when we're talking about business, it's numbers, of course. I mean,
Good answer. Second one, shop online or in store?
Oh, in store.
As an omni-channel or as a
Absolutely.
person who is focusing on e-commerce, shopping in store?
I have a very complicated measurements as a human being. So shopping online, I am the best person to spot all possible bugs and misalignments in any store. So it's fun experience, but when I really need something completely new, I prefer going offline and touching stuff before I buy.
Mm-hmm. And last question, Nike or Adidas?
Oh, Jesus Christ. ASICS, of course.
Of course.
Yay!
Brooks?
I used to have...
We've got
no,
two out of three.
not Brooks. Not Brooks. ASICS. I used to, how can I say, retire at least 2 pair of ASICS shoes a year for many years in a row. So, no, ASICS.
Yeah, I have like 3 pairs right here.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool, thank you. So I think we have gotten to know you a lot better now.
So let's get to business now. This was more about like warming up and getting to know you. But if we talk about the topic of our discussion today, and obviously our show is more about the reality behind retail. So we want to kind of hear the stories from your career. But diving into the first topic, if we talk about digital transformation, and this is a term that's been used in the industry for the last, I don't know, decade or something, but what does it really mean today, especially for a retail leader like Decathlon? Do we still need to use the term digital transformation? Because most of the more advanced retailers probably are already at some stage of this transformation, but now in the last few years, we have started talking about AI. So should we start referring to this as the AI transformation? I don't know. What are your thoughts, Dmitry?
We skip digital transformation and just move on to straight to AI transformation.
Whatever transformation. It's an interesting question actually, because I believe that it's an overused term quite a bit, and I was surprised when I started noticing cultural differences in interpreting that term. So I'm coming originally from Russia, and in Russia, digital transformation appeared in the area of business. When I started talking to my colleagues in UAE and then the Middle East, I quite quickly learned and was very much surprised that by definition, digital transformation for them has much more to do with actual technological landscape and IT and actual hardware stuff. When I moved to Europe and when I started looking here, it seems to be a mixture, a very interesting combination of everything. And this made me thinking that we have to be very careful in the first place about what we actually want to say, because digital transformation may mean anything, literally anything. The overall idea is that it's pretty much a very advanced level of industrialization in a way. We start from taking something which used to work in one way, and we apply all possible new technologies to it, making it working a bit better, a bit more efficient, completely different with the new touch points in the new environments, so on and so forth. And then we call it digital transformation for the sake of simplicity. And then with that, gradually we discover ourselves in a spot where we are using term digital transformation, not actually being very much certain what exactly the other person understands when we say this. I would be suggesting rather to focusing on different perspectives on that. It's like if I'm thinking about digital transformation, whatever that is from a customer perspective, it means first and foremost the versatility of touch points, to me at least. It's like previously I've been able to buy whatever I need only in store. Now I can also use my mobile phone. Now I can use my computer, my tablet, whatever. And this versatility of touch points would have been impossible without technological evolution, without applying new technologies to the previously mature business processes and making sure that everything is available and approachable from the new touchpoints perspective. If we're thinking about the business as such, we also have to be careful because, for example, from the classical omnichannel retail perspective, digital transformation means that we have to make everything available for digital channels. And this requires a lot of business process adjustments and a lot of build up of solutions and platforms, which can accumulate data, which can prepare information to be available for digital touchpoints and so on and so forth. But also transformation of digital is possible when we're talking about supply chain or when we're talking about production. Or for example, one of the most fascinating projects I've seen in production was the very beginning of design of a product. Previously, it was done by hands. Then digital tools were introduced, but still people were designing that in 2D, in flat, and it was like printed and cut and then sent to production. And then when you needed content, when you needed to create digital assets for the products you built, you basically take what is already produced and send it to a photo room.
Yeah.
And you make pictures of it, and then you become able to sell it. And so the project was all about reinventing this whole process with the use of 3D modeling in the very beginning. So instead of building those 2D models, the offer was, let's build 3D models, which will be very precise in terms of texture, in terms of colors, in terms of look and feel. And therefore, it would have been possible at some point to skip the final step of digital assets creation, because all those digital assets would have been already there in the first place.
Exactly. And that also enables the collaboration during the design process, right? So if there is a designer and they have a manager and they have the brand manager and whatever, everyone can kind of collaborate and comment and shorten the process, and then also better communication with the factory, because I know that as a designer, it's very frustrating when you send the specs to the factory and then you end up getting a prototype that's not exactly what you had in mind. And this whole process makes it much easier to communicate with the factories and be more accurate.
Absolutely. And then the other, sorry. Nino, go on.
I think I just want to say, because I mean, if you look at and zoom out on Decathlon, it's a very particular business model. It's vertically integrated, so you're not a typical omni-channel retailer. You have not almost exclusive your own brands, but a lot of private label brands. So you, like you said, you have to also care about the supply chain. And I think if you look at supply chain, for me, digital transformation, correct me if I'm wrong, is also thinking better supply and demand. Like Temu and Shein do very well, or let's pick Shein. They are very good at sensing demand or even creating demand in social. And then they create a 3D model out of the idea they abstracted. And a day later, they start selling it. And then they produce the batches. I think that, for me, that's also digital transformation.
Yeah, in a way, that's actually a very interesting area where digital transformation starts looking as a very strong lever with a very big potential towards the sustainability. Because one of the applications which I've seen many years ago is that you create a picture of the product you are willing to sell, you publish it, either in printed catalog back in the days when online was not there, or in online, and you collect demand. And then you, based on that demand, you estimate how much you need to produce. And with the growing speed of delivery, with the growing expectations of how quickly the order should be at your doorstep after you clicked pay, this possibility basically evaporated. And when we're talking about digital transformation at scale, and when I'm thinking about how this can be of a utmost paramount good for the humanity, one of the things coming to mind is exactly a possible lever in helping us understand how to beat overproduction, how to eliminate overproduction. Because when we are thinking about a precision of a design drawing, it becomes, at least in theory, possible to evaluate the need for that much more carefully and much more precisely than previously, when you had to produce at least something in the beginning. So digital transformation goes long ways, as long as we start dissecting it into different parts and pieces. And
exactly.
I mean, with AI, going back to the initial question, with AI, I also think that it won't be like one single AI transformation covering everything. It will be a multitude of very different by size and by scale changes, which we will keep seeing for many years to come. And they will just change the overall landscape, how people work, how people shop, how people produce.
And what are some of the changes that you're already seeing in the market, whether it's within Decathlon or just generally in the market, aside from the design process, which we covered?
That's a great question. First thing which came into my mind is that knowledge itself becomes gradually cheaper. Instead of knowing some stuff, the key skill now is to know how to ask about what you actually need, because in principle, everything becomes super available at your fingertips in seconds. Many other things, like the quality of writing, the production. No, I haven't frozen. I was thinking. Quality of production, of quality of writing, quality of content, also stops being a significant competitive advantage, because with actual developments of generative AI, it becomes more and more easy to produce top-notch quality of digital assets very quickly and at a fraction of previous costs. This is a massive transformation. The other transformation which is going on, which is vastly discussed, is all the implication about on the repetitive and mundane things which people do, like writing context, making some checks, collecting data, making tables, comparing data to each other, all the semi-analytical stuff, which has much more to do with routine and minutia than with actual thinking process. This can be super quickly automated to a very high level of precision. So a lot of implications, but the actual showstopper, as much as I see it, is that in order to be, it's very easy to start using AI for fun. When liabilities become material, you have to be much more careful before sending whatever solution you're having to production. And this care and this precision and thoroughness basically not holds back the AI in introduction, but it creates a necessary space for us to avoid painful mistakes and for us to avoid hallucinations instead of contracts or.
And I mean, this is an interesting area. Before we move on, obviously Decathlon is a large corporate, multinational corporate enterprise business, so there is a reputation at risk, like you said. There are multiple risks involved with AI. You just mentioned hallucination. How does a large corporate like Decathlon manage that risk? Because in the end, like you said, it's unavoidable. You lose probably your competitive edge if you're not using Gen AI and large language model powered elements in your journey. But how do you manage risks, and which main risks do you see next to hallucination?
I would say that main risks are clearly in the area of misleading. Like with when you miss a hallucination, and this hallucination occasionally appears to be about some sensitive point, it is very possible that there will be clear, direct financial circumstances driven by that, consequences driven by that. And how do we mitigate this risk? I think that there are only few approaches to that systematically. First and foremost, we have to educate ourselves, each and everyone, with this AI. And it's called usually AI literacy, but I think that it's not literacy. It's actually quite a professional level of use of AI. So the key skill is to be able to be so experienced that you are capable of seeing where AI stops making sense. And this requires quite a bit of understanding of the subject field, but also of language. You have to be quite educated to be able to understand the tiny word plays and to start understanding where the words AI is using stop making sense, because they sound nice, but they are not spot on. Far from that. And that's one part, like making sure that people learn and people practice. And the other part, don't allow this to go to production. As simple as that. It's like, let's keep it in the sandbox as long as we're all comfortable with whatever comes out of the sandbox, because it's much easier to keep it in rather than harness what gets out prematurely.
Right, but that's also a little bit risky, because you know that in retail everyone is really afraid, and for maybe rightful reasons, but they're afraid to put things out there. So also don't put things in the sandbox for too long. Don't wait for everything to be pixel perfect before putting it out there and seeing, what how consumers respond to it and what changes it's making in the market, because then it's kind of like an artist that never knows when his picture is ready and keeps adding more and more. At some point you have to say, okay, let's try.
Absolutely, but that's where a difference at scale and that maturity comes into play, because in principle there are very different strategies. And I once heard, like many years ago, that a very interesting saying of a CEO of the largest online news portal in the country, and he was like, for me, in order to stay the number one, the only thing I have to do is to repeat whatever competitors are doing, because I'm already number one. And it's easier to keep the score, to keep being number one, at least for a time being. I don't agree that this is the only or the most paramount strategy which is going to work, but it's clearly one of the approaches. And I believe that here, what is important is that there are different companies on the market, and there are companies which are very motivated to be the first to innovate, and there are companies who are very motivated to keep their wealth, which they already have built during the previous years. And when we're talking about a company such as Decathlon has all the reasons to be super careful because there's a lot to lose. And when we're talking about a small startup or a scale up which just started feeling traction and is trying to rapidly grow, they do have something to lose, but they are extremely incentivized to try whatever ideas they can find, because in worst case, they can pivot. That's
Exactly.
also a very interesting part of the strategy, and I believe it makes sense to keep it always in mind that there is like good strategy for a certain maturity of the company, and something which is completely available and applicable for a scale up is absolutely unapproachable for Decathlon because the liability, the scale of liability is so much different. So in very simple terms, in very simple terms, I think it's a very natural dynamic on any market when we're seeing like smaller players trying to explore and show to the rest what yields most of results, and large players on one hand making sure that the industry itself is alive and healthy, and on the other hand basically harvesting what works and implementing the best findings, whatever they are.
Right. And it's obviously very hard to keep up with the expectations from consumers because the market is moving too fast than a retailer can adopt, right? Every person now has a co-pilot or a chat GPT in their back pocket, and expect that everything will be smooth and fast and digital. And if they go to a store and there is a line, in the way to check out, or if items are missing, that's super frustrating, even more than before.
Or the store doesn't know the answer to my question. At Perplexity or
Right.
ChatGPT, it's immediately answered, and the so-called store representative, who should be trained, doesn't know the answer. I think you're right.
But at the same time, this is what makes us human, right? At the same time, this is what makes communication human and emotional. And speaking of lines, it's, I mean, at some point we need time to talk to ChatGPT, right? What you can do if not talking to ChatGPT when you're in the line.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right. And just because you say that, I see actually lots of now events coming up, studies on the, let's say, USPs of human being or the human species versus AI. And I think it's pretty interesting discussions, because AI in theory can do everything, but at the same time, it's unemotional. And I'm listening to an interesting podcast called The Shell Game. So you should really listen in, because the guy is using it as a psychotherapist. The guy is creating his own clone and sending it to his friends and family, and it's pretty interesting how frustrating those AI experiences are sometimes. So that's not the topic for today, but I see it coming. Human versus AI. What's the take for AI? What's the take for human? And where do you need which?
And speaking of frustrating experiences, let's talk a little bit about hallucinations. And I think, Dmitry, you mentioned in a previous interview that hallucinations can sometimes be kind of like an opening for something creative that people didn't think about before. This is not, a standard approach, I would say. So, would love to hear more about your take on that.
Oh, it's I do believe that it's an interesting question. I do believe that whatever we want to get out of AI is never a final product, and we always hold the final responsibility and accountability for whatever we're creating together. And if I'm keeping in mind that perspective, the fact that AI gives us imperfect answers seems to be a very interesting, enriching experience. And what I discovered myself, and what I believe makes all the sense, is that when we're asking AI open-ended questions and the AI returns us some considerations, ideas, or elaborations on that, it is possible to discover that there are things which I knew, there are things which I know that they are there inside, but I was not sure if they are actually there. But at the same time, there are things which I could not have even imagined that they are inside of what I was asking about. And this, I believe, like tapping into unknown is a very interesting feature of AI, which AI basically shows us. And sometimes it's a pure hallucination, but sometimes it's something which sparks additional level of creativity, additional level of exploration. And I don't want to say that hallucinations cannot be harmful. They absolutely can. If we're asking about something 100% factual and we rely on non-existent links, or if we rely on some inferences which we didn't manage to check, it's of course a very good example of a very risky hallucination which can come up with a very clear liability. But once again, I do believe that the accountability is always on a human being who asks the questions. And if we miss a mistake, we miss a mistake. We all have experiences working with junior colleagues, and we all have experiences of checking whatever products they're giving to us multiple times to make sure that they are at the level. It's basically the same attitude towards whatever results we're getting from AI. But when we're asking open-ended questions and we're inviting AI to co-create with us, it's possible that inferences can be a doorway into additional level of exploration. If we want to create something, if we want to wrap something into a very interesting form, if we want to find an approach which will be creative and unusual, that's exactly the space where all the things which AI can create, including all possible hallucinations, can come extremely handy.
I mean, that's exactly why we have guardrails that you can put in place in a corporate environment where you say, hey, dear chatbot, this is your scope of work. You don't go left and right beyond this. You can only give 10% refund. You don't do this. But I think those use cases are, I would say, rather relevant if you talk to your personal ChatGPT or whatever and help you get to the next level. Like you said, I like that. It's not just about, and it's not just a bad connotation having hallucinations. It's also sometimes the creative side. I like that idea. Thanks for.
But the question is if AI is already integrated with some of our systems, right? For example, if we're using AI for demand forecasting and it's integrated with our ERP, even if there needs to be a person at the end that is pushing a button to confirm the order that the AI created, at the end of the day, a human being cannot process so many, like such big quantities of data in order to create a precise forecast. So I'm not sure that if a person will need to verify everything the AI did, then they will need to do all the work from the beginning, and then there's no point to even use AI. So for some things, sometimes you need to put your trust and like fingers crossed and hope for the best.
Yes and no. I mean, my first remark here would be that when we're talking about hallucinations, we usually are talking about generative AI. And generative AI is something which is by definition, in a way, not that precise. It's a thing which can create not meaning, but which can play with words, right? Which can play with meanings. And when we're talking about like demand forecasting on any numbers crunching, my first emotional and logical response would be like, think twice or if you need generative AI at all, because it doesn't sound like the proper tool to do strictly limited analytical work. When we're talking about
you can do it today with agentic AI.
Yeah, but then when we're talking about agentic AI, and when we're talking about using algorithms which are AI powered, I would be very careful believing that we should trust the system. I would be rather thinking the same way we're doing with whatever technological things we're developing. I would be rather thinking about generating as many test cases as needed to make sure that everything which needs to function functions exactly as it is expected. Because otherwise, we are introducing an, how can I say it, unspecified level of error into something which should be super precise. And this, I think that this by definition is a very scary approach. However, with AI, it goes to a completely next level, which follows from whatever the history of AI we're already having. And the history of AI, which we're already having, shows us that since we are educating in AI based on real material we have collected through the decades of our existence, through centuries of our existence, depending on the knowledge bases we're using, AI basically learns all the biases we carry in our own societies. And this is, I mean, biases like men versus women are sort of boring. They are super important, don't get me wrong, but they are very visible. At the same time, bias over perfectionism is much harder to catch. And bias of perfectionism, for example, may lead to an unlimited number of checks. And if we miss a fact that we created an algorithm with unlimited number of checks for the sake of precision, it is possible that in simple case we burn too many resources for nothing, and in worst case this algorithm goes just crazy simply because it's a never-ending story. So I think that when we start talking about this, not hallucination, but the level of precision and trust, I think that with AI going forward, we will start seeing more unusual and unexpected challenges for us, exactly because AI seems to be gradually more and more capable of becoming extremely human-like in the capacity
Yeah.
of its thinking power.
And that's also why that's also a good point. I can see that already coming, and that you have in all those, let's say, agentic frameworks where you can build agents. That there's also the more prescriptive path. Sometimes you don't want hallucination, you don't want creativity. Where's my order, dear Decathlon? It's pretty simple. There's nothing left and right. It's just black and white. Order number, status, and here is it, or it's not delivered. That's really good call out, Dmitry.
Absolutely. And with that, there's another very interesting observation which we made in Decathlon very recently. It's like for quite some things, you don't need AI at all. There is this capacity is not needed, not necessary.
For example,
there are demand forecasting. Like you have regressions. Regressions are far not AI. They are very econometrical approaches, and you can take not linear regressions. You can take more complicated algorithms to that, but it still will be a very prescriptive algorithm, and there will be no space for deviation, at least outside of a predicted scale of error. And I think that this is also a very interesting notion in respect of digital transformation and the changes AI is bringing. Not everything requires to be revamped. There are so many things which work more than okay already today, and they deserve all the right to keep being as they are, simply because there's the need is not realized yet. Like we don't know why to change them, and changing for the sake of fun never ends good.
I like where we are going. Also, the example you just brought up. Another example would be maybe the last example where I think AI, especially in demand forecasting or sensing demand, is amazing. If you look at analyzing pictures, images, multimodal things, text, sensing demand in a way you couldn't do before. Watching a YouTube video structurally and at scale, or watching a TikTok video and then distilling down or distilling out the essence. What's the trend currently at TikTok versus 2 weeks ago? What kind of fabric do I need? Which type of style do I need 2 weeks later versus 2 weeks before? I think there Gen AI can help us a lot, if you agree, Dmitry, and to be more precise and get the data.
I would be scared if that's true. Because I think that we have two parts of our brain for a reason. We have a rational part of our brain, we have an emotional part of our brain. And whatever we're trying to predict is only partially rationally, especially when we're trying to predict brands. And there is a big influence of an emotional responses to reality. And I hope that we are not rationalizable to 100%. And the more I am right, the more it should be completely impossible to devise an algorithm which will be completely capable of forecasting trends going forward with like 100% precision. Otherwise, so if I'm wrong, it simply means that we are basically algorithms as such. And I don't like this idea to a degree. I mean, it's a very emotional response, but I personally don't. I prefer to believe that at least part of us is beyond rationalization.
Yeah,
which
sure.
is good.
It can also cause some kind of a loop, right? Because if something is on TikTok and the AI is recognizing it, and then we start manufacturing, and it goes on TikTok again, right? So like we start living in this closed loop of the same kind of trends. And
I think we're living actually in a very interesting times, because there were quite a bit of books written about this reality with that level of development of AI, and those books basically appeared middle of 20th century. It's like Stanislav Lem used to write quite a bit on that. Kurt Vonnegut covered that in some of his books also. We already had a period in our history where people got super excited about the possibility of these technological advancements, but they haven't had an ability to touch it and feel it. Now we are approaching the second wave of it, or it's not maybe the second, it's maybe the 22nd wave of it, but we're clearly at a stage where we are luckily finally are able to feel it in our everyday lives. And we have an opportunity to revisit all those basically borderline ethical questions with being more empowered by our real experience. We know how AI works, at least at this level of development, and we can reconsider, if it's really possible to predict which books will be most popular in the next year. And this is exactly a plot case from one of Vonnegut's books. It's called A Mechanical Piano, if I'm not mistaken, and it was exactly about a society which was quite formalized in algorithms, and writers there struggled big times because you had to be accepted by an algorithm which knew better than everybody which books will be super popular next year, and if you miss the point, you're not published. So I won't go into literature too far, but my point is that we live in very interesting times, because we're not the first to ask ourselves those questions, but we definitely have much more data points to actually compare and evaluate and keep thinking. Because I believe that a lot of the future we're shaping depends on the technology. However, at the same time, a lot of the future we're shaping depends on our beliefs and the ethical norms and the guardrails. But guardrails are by far not technological. Guardrails are also about which impact on the society we want to see generated by AI, which is super fascinating, but it's extremely complex.
Amazing. I think we have now gone into a very philosophical area, and I think this is worth another podcast with Dmitry. I think we have to get back to reality.
Exactly. So our podcast is a bit more, and this is obviously super interesting, but our podcast is about the reality, right? So before we wrap up, Dmitry, if you can maybe take us through one specific challenge or initiative that you were leading, either at Decathlon or a previous company, and what were your learnings from that?
Related to AI or related to
no, not necessarily
anything?
Related to anything you want.
There are plenty. I think majority of challenges usually relate to communication, like to making sure that people are aligned towards the same goal and towards the same incentives and towards the same reasons. That's the paramount background for majority of things I've been facing. A lot of things have something to do with understanding what's good, what's bad. And I have to come up with some specific example, right? So
Yes.
let's stick to demand forecasting, since we touched this topic multiple times, and this is very fresh. It's like in marketplace of Decathlon, we're working on the data as a service, and the idea there is that marketplace is very quickly growing. We're serving with the help of several thousands of sellers to customers in 21 countries, and the number of countries is growing. So it's a massive business. So there are a lot of data points which we would like to convert into insights for our sellers to help them grow better and to help them grow not only faster, but also smarter, since they are participants of the same platform. And apparently, since this project is very fresh, we spend a lot of time debating what is the most reasonable place of AI into whatever we're going to develop. And that was exactly the playground where I saw with my own eyes that as long as you are able to say what exactly you want to calculate, you don't need AI at all. You just need an algorithm. It was very interesting for me to evolve into that belief as well, because I was coming from a point like, AI can do so much more than regular algorithms. Let's just find a way how do we apply AI on everything. And people were like, no, it doesn't make sense. It produces more error. It produces more uncertainty. It produces like a lot of unnecessary results, which we don't really need. And I was like, no, it's like we should find a way. And at the end of it, I had to accept that no, they were actually right. As long as we are able to say what exact report we need to see. However, the interesting part to that is that as long as you have masses of data, it's very hard to know 100% of what you need to see. It is possible that within those masses of data, there are some insights which you could not have even imagined. And for that, it's very relevant
For that,
to
you
say,
need AI.
we have AI which can go through immense amount of masses in no time, immense amount of data in no time, derive whatever it finds interesting, doesn't show it to anybody except for us. And we sort what's hallucination, what makes sense, what deserves to be published, what deserves to be explored. So that's, for me personally, is a very recent and a very interesting learning in many layers, from many perspectives, but also from the perspective of digital transformation. And if I am to generalize that experience, I would be saying like that's a great example of importance of a sandbox. And that's also a very interesting example of an importance of an experiment. Because in the beginning, we, of course, had a list of reports we wanted to build. At the end, we ended with a completely new approach, which potentially can enlarge that list of reports infinitely. We don't know if there will be any limit to things which AI can derive. Probably yes, logically it should be, but we don't know. And that's a very interesting observation of the change, which we start seeing with AI being applied to our day-to-day duties.
Nice, I like it. Great stories. Thanks for sharing that into such detail.
Welcome.
I think that was a great conversation, Dmitry.
We loved having you on the show, Dmitry.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it big time. Yeah, really.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Dmitry, for your time.
Best of luck.
Thank you.